Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling, but there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I'm on the line with Mike Koehler. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Glad to have you here on the show. Let me do a quick introduction for you, and then we'll get right into your story. So Mike is the founder and chief strategist at Smirk New Media in Oklahoma City, digital marketing firm that you launched in July of 2010. And for more than 20 years, you have been helping people tell their stories and transform the way that content is delivered to consumers. What I want you to start with, Mike, is tell me what it is that you guys are known for today. Why do people come to you? What is it that you help them do?
Well, we were sort of the first ones, we meaning me, were the first ones in Oklahoma City to sort of dive into the deep end of the pool of digital marketing. After spending a long time in traditional media, I launched the firm solo, but nobody else was really doing social strategy and content and all of that. Now it seems like everybody's doing it now, but back then we were the first. So, what people really come to us for then is sort of our knowledge and knowing where the trends and all this is going and what the latest strategies are. And then lately our biggest product has been social media customer service, where big businesses and multi-location companies are coming to us to figure out how to sort of replace their call centers, their customer service interaction with real-time human interaction in social media.
So that's actually really interesting. How is that kind of customer service available to smaller companies, or do you have to have a big staff to manage something like that? How do you actually manage customer service for a company using real-time social media?
Well, it's scalable. What we do for just one of our smaller clients, maybe a locally owned business has 1 or 2 locations. That service is sort of baked into the content creation and monitoring and engagement that we're doing for them. What the big service is, what we call active response, has much more complexity to it in terms of how do we get the workflows created to connect my frontline people to frontline managers at the stores to the marketing and PR department at the corporate offices, and to maybe some real-time call center IT sort of tagging system there. So that work, we're creating a lot of sort of intricacies and responses, but the hardcore small business work that we started doing from day one is we're managing people's social content and we're interacting with their customers. So it's real time either way, but what we're trying with active response is showing a differentiation between what we do and what people are trying to do now with bots and AI and sort of programmable information that's really lacking in some areas.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've talked about with my my business partner a lot. Is just because you can automate it doesn't mean you should, right? And and learning how to leverage automation to create the easier opportunity for real human connection instead of trying to replace human connection with robots.
Right.
And I think a
Well,
lot of companies make that kind of mistake where they're trying to replace humans with robots instead of using robots to enhance human communication.
right. And a lot of, where the rubber meets the road on this is really, you know, one of our key measurements in that area is sort of positive or negative sentiment about a brand. And what we found and what our clients have found is that AI doesn't understand sarcasm, for one. So what might be a comment from a customer dripping with sarcasm is then tagged as a positive interaction by the AI, because all they see is, oh, I had such a great time tonight at your location. It doesn't sort of register the rolling eye emoji or sort of all the conversation above and below that.
Yeah.
Where my folks can go in, not only do they understand that, but our goal is always, how do we turn a negative comment into a positive one, or how do we turn a negative comment and rectify it in such a way that it doesn't spawn sort of 10 more negative comments, which for some of the people
Hmm.
that we work with, what's happening all the time on, on Facebook or on the review sites. So.
That makes a lot of sense. So what I want to talk about next is your origin story, right? Every hero has an origin story. It's where you started to realize that you were different, that maybe you had superpowers, and maybe you could use them to help other people. When did you start on your entrepreneurial journey? Was this company that you started in 2010, was that your first step into entrepreneurship, or what did the journey look like to get you to this point now?
Well, yeah, it really was. So I was a regular print journalist from the time I turned 16 and could go cover high school football games and write stories. I did that all the way up until, like we said, 10 years ago. But what happened in that sort of in my career in print journalism was, I sort of became the guy who figured out the internet before everybody, and was really starting to experiment once we moved here to Oklahoma City, and I was working for the state's largest newspaper. But in about 2005, 2006, 2007, we really started to experiment with what could we do to tell stories differently using some digital tools. And so those digital tools became social media. Those digital tools became live streaming video. All of this toolbox continued to expand and expand for me. And we were just sort of playing in my area, which was sports journalism, for a long time. And then as these things started to catch on, and we started to experiment more, then I did that sort of for the newsroom writ large. And we did a whole bunch of really cool things, as Twitter was sort of starting out and getting its feet under it, as we did a lot of stuff with sort of live chatting, which was really the first time we could, in 100 years, you could get real-time feedback from your customers about what content they were interested, what information they needed, and we were having those sort of conversations with them. And then, the industry being what it was, all the good that I found that came from the internet also sort of, undercut the entire industry. And so there were some setbacks there, and I quickly figured out, hey, I could leave and still sort of help people tell their story, but I could go do that for brands and get ahead of this, the tsunami that was about ready to knock over, traditional media. And that's what I'm doing now. It's a lot of the same tools and tricks that we did back when social media was just starting, but now it's about creating that connection between brand and customer instead of that connection between media outlet and reader.
So I'm curious, how did you find the transition from being a employee to being a business owner, and then from being a business owner to like growing a team and a staff and an agency? What was that like?
Well, it was, I always say that it was sort of the world's biggest trust fall, where I just sort of, I just sort of fell back and hoped that the community would catch me. So, a good a good superhero metaphor for this is there's that scene in the Shazam movie that came out last year where Billy just sort of
Yeah.
runs off of the roof of the building and yells Shazam, and fortunately it catches him and he's able to fly off. So that's what I felt like I was doing that. I had no clients, I had no money, I had a laptop that I bought from a pawn shop, and I was just like, hey, we're doing this. And so, I was an English major in college, so I didn't have any business. I had taken no business classes. I had taken no marketing classes. I didn't know how to put a P&L together, all these skills that I was lacking. I basically, would figure out how to register my LLC and put together a very rudimentary website and just start. So, that's been the scariest part. But at some point, I picked up my first intern, who turned into my first hire, who turned now into my business partner. Was really great. I was blessed by that, and there was a point at which we had to make a decision of, do we want to stay small and have maybe 5 or 6 really good clients and make a good living, or do we want to do something different? And so we made that turn to, we want to grow. One of the things I love more than anything in my job is being able to hire people and allow people to have a good life and make a good living themselves. So so we've added staff and grown that. That's had its ups and downs and roller coasters and sacrifices, but it's been a lot of learning on the fly. But the biggest thing has sort of been finding people who know more than me about the help that I need. And so fortunately that's happened.
Absolutely. So what would you say one of the biggest lessons of making that transition, as if you had started over and you could talk to yourself, right? And say, hey, make sure you do this real early on in growing your business. Is there anything you would tell yourself to do differently?
Yeah, I think the heart, one of the lessons, and we're still learning it now, it would have been not to say yes to everything. When you're sort of in
Yeah.
starvation mode and just putting something around, and you're saying yes to anybody who wants to hire you to do anything for any amount of money, it takes longer than to learn what the true value of your time is. It takes longer to realize who makes a good client and who doesn't make a good client. And so, I would just teach a little more discernment and a little more patience to myself starting out. And maybe that would have, lightened a lot of headaches down the road, where at some point we had to stop doing that. And it was hard, at least for me personally, who had lived through the lean startup years, to understand why we had to stop doing that.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson. I think a lot of entrepreneurs learn too. I know I went through that because when I started my agency, I said yes to anything and everything. Because that's what you do. You're like, I need to put food on the table, so if you'll pay me, we'll do it. And it's interesting because it's almost like a catch-22. I almost feel like you have to go through that experience to realize what your value is, so you can learn to not do that. Right? So you have to do it to learn you shouldn't do it. But it helps you really develop who you are and what you're really good at.
Right. Yeah, it really, and it's been additionally weird for us, and I'm sure you're in the same spot, is that, I always talk about my first couple of years of running Smirk was a lot like being a missionary. I had to go out to people, explain to them what something was, and then tell them how much they needed it. Oh, and if you could give me money for it too, that would be great. So, all these people had no idea what digital marketing was in 2010, let alone that it had value, to their business, and it had value where they had to pay somebody to do something. So, that was a real struggle. But now in our business, my base retainer is 10 times what it was 10 years ago. and there's a lot more competition, but people see that we're not having that ROI conversation as much anymore. We're not, people are coming in and
Because
understanding.
they know.
Yeah, they understand
Yeah.
how much work it is. They understand how much potential it is to pay for itself and bring business in. And so that part of it has gotten a lot easier. But the journey from there to here was like going through the ringer sometimes.
Yeah, that's part of the problem with being, in your case, a early adopter and an innovator in the space, is you're at the front end of that bell curve where the awareness level is not there. So all of your potential customers, they're at I talk about awareness levels, what, why, how now. They're at the what stage. They don't even know that they have a problem yet.
Right.
So you have to educate them about the problem. You have to educate them about why it's a problem. You have to educate them about how they can take care of the problem, and then how you can actually help them with it. Whereas nowadays, a new agency is coming in and everyone knows. They're looking at like, okay, I know what I need to do. How do I get it done? Who can I hire to make it happen? So the conversation is a lot different than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's really funny because some of my very first clients were the bigger ad agencies in town who would outsource to me to just write social content and everything like that. So I was doing that for a bunch of those folks. But then they all realized, oh, hey, this is a service that we need to, include in for all the clients. And so they all brought all of that work in house. And now those people with whom I was a contractor are now my peers and competitors, because everybody's fighting in this space.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I want to move on just a little bit and ask you about your superpowers, right? So what is it specifically that you either bring to your business or bring to your clients that really helps you solve problems for people? It really helps you slay the villains, so to speak. If you could nail that down and say, hey, this is my superpower, what would you say that is?
Well, one of the things that I've always brought to the table, well, a couple things. One is sort of, a very brutal honesty. I don't have sort of a BS bone in my body so I'm coming to people and very, very quickly telling them what they're doing bad. Now, that doesn't always make all the prospects smile, but, I want to make sure that people understand that there's good ways to do what we do and there's poor ways to do what we do, and there's ways to get to good, but you can't do that without recognizing the bad. So that's
That makes a lot of sense.
I had no filter, so I'm going to say, hey, your website is bad and it's affecting you in this way. There's you shouldn't be putting just pictures of baby kittens on your social media if you're a construction company, things like that, that drive me crazy. But I think that some people are just sort of being told what they want to hear, and I really have no tolerance for that. On the flip side of that, the sort of soft and fuzzy side of me is the one thing that I did from the very beginning and now is one of the big pieces that I still contribute to the team is I'm very interested in the voice of the content voice and the consistency of what brands sound like and how they use words and how that is such a big differentiator in both the daily organic content that we put out and the customer service content we put out. So, I see oftentimes where in the online content space where people fall into the trap of the brand's content sounds like whomever is managing the brand, whoever the manager of the brand's content is. So, so I would see where there's these law firms that have been around 100 years, and the average age of the lawyer is 72 years old, but they've hired a 22-year-old intern to post social media content, and that content sounds like a 22-year-old intern. And so that gap is something that I really feel strongly about, but it sort of, scratches that you know, English lit major in me, where I can go through and we analyze vocabulary, we analyze words and emoji use and all of these different things. And I just want to paint, I just want to help, you know, our clients paint the most honest picture of themselves online. And that means, it has to be consistent in the way that they speak.
Yeah. I call that unconscious trust signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the way that we interact with pretty much anything, our brain's test for truth is consistency. And even things that like you wouldn't pick up if you weren't an English lit major, didn't quite understand, you may not know exactly why it makes you feel uncomfortable or why it's not congruent, but it'll be there, right? And that's why we talk about things like branding, right? And, you know, if you have a consistent style and consistent typography and consistent color uses and consistent vocabulary usage, it's a unconscious signal of trust to your potential customers, saying that we are who we say we are, and you can rely on us. We have integrity, that kind of thing. So I think it's foundational for those brands to be able to actually attract customers in any form of media, regardless of whether or not it's social.
Yeah. And that's still, to me, that's still an indication of an immaturity in how people do their social media content, where it's still, you know, the youngest person on the marketing team is like, oh, you know how to run a Facebook page, run this. And there's still a level of sophistication there that's missing. And that's where, you know, I'm surprised by that and not surprised by that. You know, as we dig deeper into sort of doing things for these bigger brands, you know, it's still like there's only a third of companies, you know, in the latest study I saw, that are even monitoring for customer service at all. You know, it's 2019 and people are still not, you know, once 5 o'clock comes, nobody's answering questions on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And that still shocks me. It makes me smile because that's a lot of potential business, but
opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about the flip side of superpowers, right? Superpowers, which you help to solve problems. Your fatal flaw would be your kryptonite, right? Superman has kryptonite. Batman's not actually a superhero. He's just a rich guy who's really dedicated, right? What would you say your fatal flaw is? Something that has either held you back personally or held back your company that you've had to work on? And more importantly, what have you done to help overcome that, to help continue to grow your business for people who might, you know, struggle with the same thing?
Well, I think it's sort of similar to those early lessons uh, of saying yes to anything, and that meant really getting overextended and really not understanding, you know, what my capacity was, and, you know, honestly, you know, in those early few years, doing a lot of really bad work, just because I always thought, you know, more clients equals more success. And so, you know, instead of doing great work for 3 people, I was overextended and doing bad work for 10. So, you know, and I think
Doing mediocre work.
Yeah, that was a lot of it, you know, and just to be a little bit more open and personal about it, you know, I've had success, and I know a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space have this, or I had a lot of issues with sort of the definition of success when I first started, and sort of measuring myself against that almost on a daily basis. And then it was either a pass fail every day. And really, if, you know, losing a client or, you know, something, or a mistake went out on the work that we did, or not getting picked after giving a proposal or something like that, you know, it was really hard mentally to sort of cope with that too. And, you know, fortunately, what I did was surround myself with some great people, not, you know, had myself do a lot less, and had learned to delegate, and really learn to not care so much about measuring myself against other things or sort of abstract things, but just, being more content that the business existed and that things were going okay.
Yeah, and that was like for me, on that same journey, it was like my success was a revenue number. Like, had I hit this revenue number yet? And when you're focused on the revenue number, you realize that you're making choices to hit revenue numbers instead of choices that are best for your customers. And I realized, like, somewhere along that way that, like, I didn't actually need that revenue number to be happy with what I was doing in my life. And the focus shifted to how can I help my customers and, and still hit what I wanted to hit. And it's interesting because once that focus shifted to how can I do the best thing for my customers, my business grew, right? And when it's to your point, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that definition of success, and what does success look like? And one of the things that I've noticed, at least in my business, is that for me, success is my clients get the best result possible, and the benefit of that is that I get paid really well for it, and my agency gets paid well for it.
Yeah, whenever anyone asks me what our vision statement is, it's great work, happy clients, making money. That's my vision statement. So if we could
I like it.
That's all. That's all we need to be doing. But it's been a journey to get to that point.
Awesome. So we talk on the show regularly about your driving force, right? Just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, Batman fights to save Gotham. You guys fight for happy clients who are making money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. It's a good vision statement. So if you're if that's the driving force, that's what you're fighting for. The other side of your driving force is your common enemy, right? I like to think of your common enemy as the thing you're fighting against, right? For every time you bring in a customer or a new agent or a new client into your agency, there's some sort of struggle in education that happens, mindsets that are holding them back, that are keeping you from getting really good results for them. If you had like a magic wand, you could just bop your new clients in the head with it and magically remove something that is holding you back from getting great results from your clients. What would you say that thing is? Something you have to fight against regularly?
Well, part of it is just perception of what we do. I mean, the reason we're called Smirk, which is a story I tell all the time, is I feel like, we're at this sort of intersection of something I take very seriously, how the digital world has impacted all parts of our life, and the fact that what we do sometimes is very, very silly. This is back when you could poke people on Facebook. You could, everything had a silly name, and everything on the social media side was not taken seriously. And so it's that combination of I'm sending a tweet, which is a ridiculous thing to do, but it is for a very serious purpose of helping our client. But that perception that social is still something, is still a punchline, is even with clients that come in, is still something that I wish would go away. I mean, you see how people talk about it in the media. You see how older people still act like it's this confusing and crazy thing, and that's something that we still have to fight against. And I just wish if people could see it the way I've seen it impact real lives, they would treat it with a little bit more respect, I guess, or at least treat it as something that is much more positive than negative.
Yeah, and it's an interesting battle you have to fight there, because all of your customers are using social media, right? They use it personally, and the business stuff that happens with it is happening right alongside their teenage son who's posting cat videos, and their friends who are posting political stuff, and that make them want to pull their hair out right now. And then it's right next to serious business stuff, and that applies everywhere from Facebook to YouTube to even iMessages has business chat, right? And you can communicate with a business on iMessage and talk to T-Mobile and get things taken care of right next to your conversation with your best buddy. right? So like getting them to separate and think about there is a serious aspect to social media that as a company you need to treat it well, and treat it like it's a serious part of your business, because I mean it's a bottom line revenue driver if you do it well.
Well, and now sort of the unseriousness of it has been replaced by sort of the paranoia about privacy. And so now instead of getting laughs with Zuckerberg as the punchline, I can get laughs with Zuckerberg as Big Brother. But but then people are like, it's just this duality where people are like, oh, those places are stealing my privacy, and they know everything about me. But then at the same time, they're like, oh, look, that's exactly the kind of brand of soap that I like. And I'm so glad that I'm seeing ads about that instead of ads about stuff that I don't like. So it's that whole, everybody wants the web to sort of serve their whims and be very focused narrowly on what they like and what's in their bubble, but at the same time, not understanding or not wanting to understand that, well, this data exists so you can have a better relationship with what you're doing on the web. So
yeah, it's
interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. We probably have a whole podcast just on that and like how that's going to affect society and culture and whatnot, because it's really interesting. But it's probably outside the scope of breaking down all of how social media affects us. What I want to talk about next is your tool belt, right? Some of the things that you guys use to make your business do what it is, right? So maybe you have a big magical hammer like Thor, or a bulletproof vest like your police officer down the street, or maybe you guys just really love how Trello or Evernote lets you manage your stuff. What are some of the things that you guys use every day to either manage your clients or to deliver your services for your clients that actually that are game changers?
So there's a couple of things. We really live out of Asana and out of Slack every day. And Asana has become such a robust tool for us. And I was sort of a late adapter compared to all the strategists who are doing many more tasks than me. But as I've built out the business development team, the ability to sort of template out, really our customer journey. We use Slack internally for all of our communication, and I love how those two things play together. A new tool that I've been using just solo that I'm trying out for the team is this web service called Sunsama. I think it's SUNSAMA. And what it is basically the strange baby of Asana in the Google Calendar, where I can go through and plan my day and see both task and calendar items, prioritize those, assign amount of time to each of those. So what I do every morning, which is the biggest thing in my tool belt, is just how I manage my time. From 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. every morning, I'm really digesting what does my day look like, making sure, looking at my task list, that setup time for me is so valuable that I don't think anybody should start their day without sort of that pause at the very beginning before you roll into all the stuff that you have to do. And so
that's a thing I need to start doing, and not take early morning appointments, and moving back a little bit so I can do that more often, because I know the days that I do, I get more done. And you said that tool is Sunsama. I'll have to check that out.
I think it's Sunsama,
Sunsama. Okay.
SAMA, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. We use Slack as well in our business. We use Trello for the project management, though, not Asana. I've heard a lot of good things about Asana, though, so we might have to check that out at some point. But yeah, those couple of things come up regularly. The other one that I've noticed is how frequently guests on the show talk about that morning time where you plan your day, how important that is to actually growing a successful business. So it's really interesting to see that continue to come up.
And then on the social side, we've transitioned recently to using Sprout Social for managing all of our client accounts. We're actually an agency partner for them now, because some of the stuff we're doing with active response sort of pushing the boundaries of what Sprout can do. But we really like that. I was a Hootsuite guy from back in the day, and just
Yeah.
their inability to really innovate sort of really got us in a bind. And so Sprout's been a really great partner for us. We just had to onboard like, I don't know, like 150 new accounts with them, so for a new client, and they were cool with it. So, and it was a pretty smooth transition.
The Hero Show will be right back. Are you tired of trying to write webinars that don't consistently convert? How would you like to have a webinar that effortlessly created sales in your online business? You can. Introducing the Webinar Alchemy Workshop. Webinar Alchemy Workshop is an online masterclass that will help you write incredibly persuasive webinars for your online courses quickly and easily. Using what you learn in this class, you can build a webinar that educates your entire audience while still creating sales. For a limited time, you can purchase this masterclass for only $7, and you'll get the exact framework I've personally used to help my clients sell more than $1 million worth of online coaching and training just over the last year. Simply text the word alchemy, ALCHEMY, to 444-999, and I'll send you all the details.
The music is by Purple Planet Music. Visit www.purple-planet.com.
And now, back to the show. Awesome. So let's move on a little bit and talk about your own personal heroes, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his Rich Dad. Who were some of your heroes? Were they real-life mentors, speakers, or authors? Were they peers or just a few years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you've accomplished so far with your agency?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had a bunch of people just pop in and out of my life. Sometimes I feel a little like Forrest Gump that way. I had a great mentor when I was at the newspaper named Mike Sherman, he was my editor. I was his number two. And, he was really part of that innovation that we were doing with trying out new tools. It's probably a common story, but Mike and I started reading Good to Great by Jim Collins. And this must have been 2006-ish when that book first came out. And it really changed us in that, we were journalists who didn't have a business mindset. And by the time we got through all that, we had a business mindset for the journalism that we were doing. And that's what really, really sort of, lit the fuse on me of doing something differently, because it was about analyzing data and it was about listening to the customer. And for 100 years, the newspaper business had been, 10 old white guys in a room deciding what the best news was for everybody. But once we sort of opened our eyes, once the web opened our eyes to readers giving us feedback for, seeing what we're getting online, and being and really being subservient to that data, that changed. What Mike did really changed my life and changed the direction of things. There's always been, I'm a big Gary Vee guy. I was since Crush It first came out. That whole idea, that he's a competitor of ours now, actually. So the of being able to really share good content and the engagement being so important was for us. And then my wife is just, not to be all corny, but she was working the real jobs while I was out trying to make this thing happen, and really busting it for us, and listening and being patient with the growth, and being patient with the promises and all of that. And so, and then just our community, Oklahoma City is really interesting, because there was a handful of us that all went out in 2009, 2010, 2011 was really a renaissance time for our city, and when a lot of people went out and sort of started their own businesses. And that was, we were a real tight-knit Twitter community there in 8, 9, 10, and we all still lean on each other and refer business to each other. And I wouldn't be around if not for all those people. So.
Yeah. I particularly feel it with the wife as well. My wife is a homemaker. We got 4 kids at home, and she's always like, I don't know what I'm contributing. I'm like, if you weren't doing what you were doing, I couldn't do what I'm doing.
Right.
Like it makes everything go around. So I appreciate that as well. Um, the last thing we talk about on the show is your guiding principles, right? So what are the top 1 or 2 principles or actions that you use on a daily basis that you think contribute to your success and the influence that your company enjoys today? Maybe something you wish you had known when you started out.
It's changed over the years. Obviously, now that I have 12 employees now, and what's really gets me through the day now is really about it's servant leadership. It's really what can I do to help make them as successful as they can be? What can I do to shine light on them? I'm getting old. I've done all that's what brings me joy now instead of like, hey, look at me, look at me. So that's been a lesson, quite honestly. So
Yeah.
that's super important to me. How do I put my people in the best position for them to succeed? So loyalty is a big thing for us. Flexibility is a big thing. There was a short time there between when I left the newspaper and when I started the company where I worked for a traditional PR agency. And it was a very short time because there were a lot of rules at that place. And what we've done is created a culture here where we're all about flexibility. All I care about is that you're doing great. Those 3 guiding principles: great work and happy clients and money. If you're doing that, I don't care if you're in the office or out of the office. I don't care if you work at Starbucks or work at your desk. I want to be as flexible as I can in order to get you into a headspace where you're doing great work. And then just honesty.
Yeah.
Every problem that I see, not just in our business, but in the world, is people not being 100% honest and then having to figure out and take a lot of their time and energy figuring out to remember all the dishonest stuff that they said to people. So, so it goes back to what I really first talked about was if something's not working or if you're doing something, I'm just going to tell you because the consequences of telling you are not nearly going to be as bad as the consequences of not telling you and then having to fix it later. So.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And as you realize the time management that goes into trying to keep up with not having integrity.
Yeah.
It's not a profitable way to go.
And then I'll be honest with you. Ironically, that time where we were doing poor work, it was because of that. It was like, I know I told this person that I would have this project done. I don't remember the excuse I gave for missing that deadline. I don't remember the excuse I gave for not having this thing done right. All those plates, you try to spin all those plates and they're all going to fall. And then it's 10 times the suffering after that. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the last thing we do on the show is something it's real simple. I call it the Hero Challenge. Hero Challenge is basically this. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story on the show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know quite a few people. I have a really good friend of mine named Bobby, who was actually at the lunch. I have the napkin on my wall from the lunch we had when I first came up with the idea of starting my own company. He's a great entrepreneur, great marketer. Grew up, has sort of an extraordinary life story growing up in a boys' home around other boys and sort of bootstrapping his way up to things. And he's a guy who is a mentor of mine and a great creative sort of calming force in my life. And another one of those people, if not for that lunch, would I be sitting where I'm sitting today? And he's a great entrepreneur himself. So.
Cool. We'll reach out after the show and see if we can get connected with him.
Sure.
That basically brings us to the end of our interview. So what I want to do here is I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Last question: where can people find you if they're interested in learning from you or hiring you? And more importantly, what is the ideal type of person to reach out and hire an agency like yours?
So Smirk New Media, we're the only ones as far as I know. So everywhere, so that's our URL, smirknewmedia.com. That's all of our social channels are that. All of my social channels are MKOKC. So on all of the Twitter, I'm on Twitter, should be on there now, quite honestly, but I'm on all there. You know, the ideal client that we've grown into, you know, and people can see this as they sort of read, you know, our story on our website and the way we do things. What we are really looking for now is internal marketing people who need help. You know, there's a lot of people who are working now as maybe a 1 or 2 person marketing team at a bigger company, and they just don't have the time to keep up with everything nor the time to do everything. So what we want to do is we want to be an extension of that marketing department. You know, when 5 o'clock rolls around, you can go home and feel secure in that you're still getting great engagement on your brand. You're still getting people aren't left wondering with questions, wondering what the answers are. And that's where we feel like we fit in with a lot of boots on the ground and a lot of creativity in our heads.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you are listening to the show and you've been in that spot, I know I've been in that spot when I ran a marketing team for a big regional firm, and the marketing department was me and one other person, right? And we were managing the marketing for 100 plus employee company, and having someone like you to come in and actually take care of some of those things would probably be really helpful. So if you're ever in that space, definitely reach out. And just make sure I got the web address right. It's Smirk Media or smirknewmedia.com.
Smirknewmedia.com.
Yeah. So smirknewmedia.com. You can reach out to Mike there. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners before we hit the end record button here?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And you know, if any chance anybody gets to tell their story, they should take advantage of it, because you don't know sort of who's going to be listening and who you're going to spark after that conversation.
Absolutely. That's why we do the show. So again, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on. We really appreciate it.